I don't need messages of encouragement, LOL. I signed a 2-year deal in ATL. I'm a free agent. That's what happens at the end of a contract, LOL. I'm good. Ain't going nowhere. Just see y'all on the other side. I'm grinding right now. Part of the business.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at Redrock _Beeble. We're going to be doing another of the Dynasty Rookie Ranks podcast today. Go and check out yesterday's show for full analysis on the top 20 players I have in my Dynasty Rookie Ranks. Today we're going to be doing 21 through number 40 in today's show. So, Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
What a good idea that is. Just a quick recap, though, for those of you who didn't listen to tomorrow's podcast. I'll give you the list of players. You can go back and listen to that show, which I do highly encourage you do. Even if you already listened to it, go download it again. Helps the numbers. But go and listen to yesterday's show, and you can hear the reasoning behind why I have players in certain slots. But for now, I'll tell you, just run through a recap of the top 20 players. At number 1, it's Luka Doncic. At number 2, it's Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. At number 3, DeAndre Ayton. Number 4, Trae Young. At number 5...
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Mo Bamba, of course. Number 6, Marvin Bagley III. Number 7, Wendell Carter Jr. Number 8, McCall Bridges. Number 9, Michael Porter Jr. Number 10, DRC Zaire Smith. Number 11, Miles Bridges. Number 12, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Number 13, Colin Sexton. Number 14, The Rock DJ.
Rock DJ.
Robbie Williams. Number 15, Janan Musa. Number 16, Josh Okogie, who I pronounced incorrectly yesterday. I apologize to Josh and all his families, and I apologize to my own family for mispronouncing Josh's name. Number 17, Kevin Huerta. Number 18, Ali Okobo. Number 19, The Fort, Kevin Knox. And number 20, Lonnie Walker IV. That's a recap of the top 20 from yesterday's show, so let's get stuck into the next portion of this Dynasty Rookie Ranks as we look through picks 21 through to pick 40 on today's show. Start with pick 21. It's a good place to start, and I am going with Jacob Evans, who was selected by the Golden State Warriors with pick number 28. He's a player from Cincinnati, as you'd all be aware, a guy that fits really, really well with what Golden State wants to do. Wing defense, really, really strong defensive player. He was a junior for Cincinnati last year, averaged almost 17 points per 40 minutes. But I think what's important to look at with what he does is the role that he fills on this team. Andre Iguodala, potential replacement down the track. He averaged over 6 rebounds and over 4 assists per 40 minutes for Cincinnati, 1.7 steals and 1.3 blocks. That is the makings of a potentially very valuable fantasy guy. Now, probably never going to have top 50 upside, but could very comfortably have multiple top 100 seasons, maybe in that 90 to 100 range, and it won't happen this year. We're talking 3-4 years down the track, but he fits perfectly, in my opinion, with what Golden State wants to do and where he can go in the future. Shot 38% across his 3 years in college from 3, which is obviously really strong. A solid enough free throw shooter, 75% last season from the free throw line. The scoring stuff is not necessarily great from him, and his overall 2-point shooting wasn't awesome either, 47% last year. But still, yeah, his ability on the defensive end, the ball handling stuff, his ability to impact the game is key. A box score plus minus of over 10, really strong advanced numbers, even if the shooting's not quite there. Just really, really think Andre Iguodala, not necessarily Denver Andre Iguodala or Philadelphia Andre Iguodala, who was a really high-ranked fantasy player. Probably should have a look at to see exactly where Andre got to in fantasy ranks, because it was pretty bloody high. But I'd say more of early career Warriors, Andre Iguodala. That's the sort of number I think that you can see Evans getting to. Now, Iguodala, Jesus, his rankings, all right, as a rookie, 66th, then 58th, 18th, 30th, 35th, 24th, 49th, 41st, 65th, then his first year in Golden State, 91. So maybe Denver and early Golden State. Iguodala is what Evans can top out to be. Never a high usage sort of a player, never averaged 20 points per game in his career. I really do like Jacob Evans, and I especially like the selection of where he went to the Golden State Warriors. At number 22, a player who has shot up the rankings in terms of being relative to his draft spot, and that's DeAnthony Melton, who was picked number 46 by the Houston Rockets. I've got him at number 22 on my Dynasty rookie ranks. I could not believe that he fell as far as he did. It didn't really make a huge amount of sense for him to go that far. Maybe teams, and there are a lot of dumb teams in the NBA, we know that, were bothered by the fact that he didn't play in college due to that suspension from USC. But he is a guy that has that tremendous defensive ability, can pass the ball quite well. The scoring and the shooting is obviously a concern. 28% in his first year at USC, just 70% from the line, but per 40 minutes, 5 assists, 7 rebounds, 2.8 steals, and 1.5 blocks. I will take that defensive ability and his ability to influence the game on that end. And I think there is hope for his shooting to come around. He projects really well. Now, he's not going to have a huge role this season. I think we're all aware of that. Chris Paul will likely be back. Jim Harden's around. Eric Gordon's still there. But we're talking, again, 2 to 3 years in the future when Paul becomes 36, 37 years old. Does Melton slide into that backup point guard role? Will Eric Gordon still be around? Will Jim Harden take somewhat of a step back? That's all possible. Think of Melton as a better assisting, worse rebounding, potentially better shooting version of DeJounte Murray, and that clearly has fantasy value. He's in a spot to learn offensive responsibilities under Mike D'Antoni, and I think it's a really, really strong spot to get a guy like DeAnthony Melton, and I'd be taking him fairly high in Dynasty with the understanding that he's not going to be a big contributor early on in his career. The next two guys on my list are international players. Number 23, Rowdy Rodions-Kurucs, who was selected by the Brooklyn Nets. Kurucs is another one of those three-point shooting wing players. He battled some injuries last season and was benched at Barcelona. So you can look at his numbers and go, well, they don't look great. And that's true. But with Barcelona, there's a lot of politics. They're very, very anti-players going to the NBA. And the coach has very much got that attitude, screw this bloke, he's not going to be around. He's only using this as a stepping stone. And they limit their playing time in that regard. So that's part of the reason why his numbers were quite low playing for Barcelona. He was actually in their second team last season and really barely saw any playing time at all and was benched for big stretches of time. Didn't shoot the ball overly well, but he can develop into that three-point shooting guy. High steal rate, really strong block rate as well as a wing player. Rebounding, not too bad. Strong free throw shooter. He's a guy that, while he might not have massive upside, I can see him being a solid 23, 24-minute bench guy who can score, who can hit threes, and who can generate steals. And he's in a situation on the Nets where that opportunity is clearly going to be there for him. We know that they do enjoy getting these international guys in. They drafted Can and Musa, who I had higher up in the ranks in the first round, and Rowdy, the hot rod over here, is an interesting fantasy translation guy. I am pretty interested in what he can do as a player, and I'm not too worried about his numbers from last season, given the issues, well, not necessarily the issues, but the way that he was used by the coaching staff in Barcelona. I don't expect a big role from him immediately, but he is a nice high-ish upside type of a player who I would be looking at this spot, which is at number 23. And then number 24, a guy that we spoke about on the Dynasty Value podcast on Monday, and that's Issac Banga, who went to the LA Lakers after that pick was traded from the Philadelphia 76ers. I spoke about him in significant length on that show. A German wing player who can handle the ball. He's obviously a long way away, and if the Lakers are successful in their free agent goals, he's going to find it hard to come over this season. He probably won't, or find a significant role. But a guy who played as a big sort of point guard over in Germany, playing for Frankfurt, I believe, averaged in only 19 minutes per game, 2.6 assists, 4.3 rebounds, over a steal, and half a block. The shooting is the concern for him, though. 39% from the field and only 22% from three. Those are not good numbers, but it's the rebound, assist, steals, blocks combination. Again, I'm not going to compare everyone to Andre Iguodala, but Issac Banga is in that similar sort of a zone in terms of just how the statistical profile happens. And I do think he's got some pretty significant upside to be a solid wing rotation guy who gets you those sneaky maybe Evan Turner's a better example than an Andre Iguodala, a small forward who can run the point, run the offense, rebound, steal, get assists, and can't shoot threes, which is basically exactly what Evan Turner is. Banga can be a solid defender, pretty good length. I like that pick there for him, and I think that he's a guy, again, a second-round guy who's jumped into the top 30 of my ranks. In fact, 7 first-round players in the actual NBA draft are outside my top 30. And that's, I could easily go through and do dynasty ranks and look at the way that they were drafted in the NBA and move guys 1 or 2 spots around. I think that's bullshit. I think that's disingenuous. So you'll see players who were drafted in the 20s fall outside my top 40 inside dynasty ranks, and you'll know who they are by the end of this show. And guys who were drafted in the 40s inside the top 25, like D'Anthony Melton. Guys like Rowdy Rodion's Kuruks, who stepped up. Issac Banga, they're 3 second-round guys in a row that kicked off today's show. No point in me going just by draft order, because that's what's the point of me doing this show? I think NBA teams get things wrong all the time, because they do. I get things wrong as well. Nobody's perfect, but it's not like we're saying, NBA teams drafted them in this order, therefore that means that these guys are the best in this particular order, because that would be clearly very, very wrong, because we know that NBA teams screw shit up all the time. Let's go on to the next grouping of 4 players at pick number 25, and that is Kyrie Thomas, who went to the Detroit Pistons. Loved what the Pistons did overall in this draft by getting Kyrie Thomas and Bruce Brown. I think Thomas, as a wing player, as a strong defender, is an interesting type of a guy, and his sort of value can be really useful in fantasy because of his ability to generate steals. He's a guy that rebounds at a fairly strong rate. The shooting stuff was good. He hits threes. His fantasy translation numbers are pretty good. And last year he did average 19 points per 40 minutes. But importantly, it's 5.5 boards. And that's actually down because his freshman and sophomore season at Creighton, he was at 7.9 and 7.4 rebounds. So a strong rebounding guard. Can get assists, 3.5 last season, 2.1 steals. Hit his threes in his 3 seasons in college, 42, 39, and 41. Strong shooting numbers. Contributing threes, contributing rebounds, assists, and steals, with an ability to score really efficiently, which he did across all 3 seasons at Creighton, make him another second-round player who I would take inside the top 30. So I really do like Kyrie Thomas, and I'd be well ahead of him, well ahead of his draft spot in terms of looking at his overall dynasty value. And that is, again, Kyrie Thomas, who went to the Detroit Pistons. The next guy we'll talk about is Chandler Hutchison, who went to the Chicago Bulls and who was promised by the Chicago Bulls, and draft promises remain just an absolutely ludicrous thing, and NBA teams should never do them. Hutchison is a wing player from Boise State, a guy who fits in exactly what the NBA sort of needs. Scoring, ball handling type wings. His defense maybe leaves a little bit to be desired, but the Bulls have room for him to be an immediate contributor on this team. There are still concerns about what he can do, but not a bad steal rate he was able to put up during his time at Boise State, 1.9 per 40 minutes, 10 rebounds and 4.5 assists. That's what should get you excited. 26 points per 40 minutes. That should get you excited. 36 from 3. Really nice numbers. The free throw percentage makes you a little bit concerned about the 3-point shooting. Only 73% and 69.
Giggity!
Across his time in college. That's somewhat of an issue there, and the usage isn't going to be as high as what it was last season, where he was at 33%. His advanced numbers aren't great, but that's why he was taken in the 20s, and that's why I've got him here at 26. He's not as high as guys like DRC, Zaire Smith. No, not as high in that sort of a zone, but was able to up his 3-point rate significantly. He had been at 16% of his shots, 3-point attempts in his junior year, and took it up to 30% last year, and did it at a decent percentage. So that's a real positive to me when looking at a guy like Chandler Hutchison, a wing player. And I know my brain immediately goes comparison because their name's Chandler, but Chandler Parsons was a wing player who hits threes at a decent rate, can score, but handles the ball, gets you 4 assists, rebounds the ball, gets steals, and that's pretty much the sort of statistical profile that a guy like Chandler Hutchison can bring out to you. and putting up some decent enough numbers there to be a useful enough player in the NBA and in fantasy leagues. We're talking about a guy though that is older, so I guess that has some level of concern in terms of where his long-term value is. But I think he can come in and be a rotation guy, very very much sort of straight away, I guess is the best way of looking at that, and we could see him being a strong enough player to have value in a lot of different dynasty type scenarios. Chandler Hutchison. Trying to have a look, see if I can see comparisons to him across on 538. He's got his top comparison players: Landry Fields, Marshawn Brooks, and these are not great names. Quincy Pondexter, Jeff Taylor. Haven't said that name in a while. Gerald Henderson. But then you got the artist formerly known as Torian Prince, Dylan Brooks, Karis LeVert, a few guys there who I do like, who's got a level of similarity to what he can do. But a guy who does have relative strengths and can be a rotation player for a few seasons. The next guy I am really interested in, and that is Mitchell Robinson of the New York Knicks, a player who was enrolled at Western Kentucky, pulled out to focus on the draft for the season. An athletic 7'1" center who can protect the rim, who can apparently get to the rim from the opposing three-point line with only one dribble. And by apparently, I mean actually can, because I saw a video of him doing that. It was nonsense to watch it, to be honest. But a guy that has that vertical ability to protect the rim and vertical ability on offense. You should be taking a flyer on a guy like this. The Knicks center prospects, yes, their best center is Kristaps Porzingis, but they don't like playing in there, and he's going to be injured. Enes Kanter could or could not be around. Lukey Cornett, Isaiah Hicks, Enes Kanter, is he going to be around? Who knows? So there is an ability here for Robinson, and I'd be taking him higher than that spot that he was drafted in fantasy, not fantasy, in real life. Scenario where he was taken in that early second round by the Knicks. I'd be much more in on him. I think he probably struggles a little bit this season, but as an upside play, I'm all about looking at Mitchell Robinson. But he does have to develop a more reliable offensive game. I think that's probably the fairest way of putting what he can do. Now at pick 28, the burner, Jalen Brunson from Villanova. Obviously, a really solid player who was able to put up good numbers playing for Villanova as a guard. An older player, no doubt, and maybe that limits some of his upside, but goes to a situation in Dallas where Rick Carlisle will be able to utilize him in a fairly strong way. Averaged 24 points per 40 minutes last year on the back of really strong shooting. 60% two-point percentage, 41 from three, 80 from the line, 6 assists, 1.2 steals, didn't block. I don't think he blocked a single shot in his college career, which is one. He blocked one shot in 3 years. That's Evan Fournier levels of shot blocking. That's astonishing, but really strong. 64 true shooting, 66 in his sophomore season. They are really strong efficiency numbers for a guy like Jalen Brunson. His upside is maybe not all that high, but for a team that's able to squeeze value out of JJ Barea, out of Devin Harris, out of Yogi Ferrell, and with those guys moving on either this season or the next season, Harris already gone, Ferrell as a restricted free agent, Barea as an old guy, Brunson can move into that, be a 22-minute player who gets 4 assists, averages 10 points with 1.5 threes, and does it on 48% shooting at some point in his prime. I think that's realistic. The upside's low. So when you look at the guy ahead of him there, Mitchell Robinson, you'd be drafting Mitchell Robinson thinking, shit, maybe this becomes great, and maybe he develops into Clint Capella, which many of these late first-round guys turn into. Maybe he becomes DeAndre Jordan. Maybe he becomes Rudy Gobert, that sort of a player. Whereas Brunson, you go, he's not developing into Bradley Beal. He's not developing into Gary Harris.
Nice, Gary!
He's not developing into whatever other great shooting guard you want to talk about. But he can be the guy who is useful and does have a solid fantasy type profile. And that's useful. It's really useful. Can he be a guy like Shelvin Mack or Reggie Jackson or these sort of Jordan Clarkson, these guys who just, Clarkson shithouse, but being guys who can produce value enough. And when you're talking about picks here in the late 20s in dynasty drafts, it's pretty hard to go past someone like the burner. Jalen Brunson there at pick number 28, or rank number 28 in my Dynasty rookie ranks. Let's go on to the next group of guys. At 29, it is another member of the Detroit Pistons, Bruce Brown from Miami. He was really, really bothered by injury in his last college season for Miami, and that caused his production to dip quite significantly. So I guess you have to take a level of skepticism with that production, but also a level of hope that he can be more like what we saw from him in his freshman season versus what we saw from him in his sophomore season. If we have a look at the per 48 numbers, he averaged fewer points in his sophomore year compared to the freshman year, fewer assists, fewer steals, shot considerably worse from the field, 51 as opposed to 48 from 2, 35 as opposed to 27% from 3. These are not great signs. All his advanced numbers, his box score plus minus, which was almost 10 as a freshman, great numbers, went to 6.6. The true shooting from 56, above average, down to 49%, really, really poor. Free throw rate dropped, 3-point percentage or attempt rate dropped, PER dropped. Everything pretty much dropped for Bruce Brown in that second season. And that's a lot of the reason why his draft stock fell, and he was able to be selected by the Detroit Pistons in the second round. But he is a player who I think has some upside if he can get back to that that first year production. A strong rebounding guard who hits threes at a decent enough rate, can generate steals, and can handle the ball, and combine that with Kyrie Thomas and the lack of studs really in that Detroit backcourt. Luke Kennard, I really like. Reggie Bullock, I'm not sure about. Stan Johnson, I don't know. Reggie Jackson's not great. There's an ability there for Brown to develop and become a scoring guy who hits threes, but can also handle the ball and can also generate those steals. So I think at this spot, again, there's many players who were selected in the first round who I've got behind Bruce Brown, and maybe I'm not overly confident with this sort of selection at this spot, but I'd be willing to roll the dice on a guy now that he is getting healthier and can develop at an appropriate rate. The 30th guy on my list is one of those players who was selected much earlier, and I've got him down low. Now, this could very easily come back to bite me on the ass, and you could very easily disagree with this, and I am more than happy. People should be disagreeing with things if they don't believe it. You don't just take everything I say at face value. I think that Troy Brown has got... This is Troy, I didn't mention Troy Brown of the Washington Wizards out of Oregon. He has got some pretty interesting upside as a player. I do really worry about his ability to shoot. That's a concern. He's not a guy that I would have been taking in this area. He played a lot of point guard at Oregon, which boosted up his assist numbers. He was at 5.8 assists. 4.1 assists per 40 minutes and 2 steals. And those numbers by themselves look good, but the shooting stuff was poor. 29 from 3, 74 from the free throw line. I think when I look at this, if there's one player who I probably regret having as low as I do, it probably will be Troy Brown. I wouldn't be super confident that he's going to be able to achieve his ceiling. But there is enough of a ceiling there where we could look at it and go, yeah, maybe I'm a little bit off on what Troy Brown can do. But I do think it's quite a few years away from what he's able to do, and that shot really has to come around for him to be that player. Now, he does have some really strong comps over on 538, Thad Young, Justice Winslow, Drew Holiday, DeMar DeRozan, Mo Harkless. Some strong comparisons there. But there's also Xavier Henry, Archie Goodwin, Stanley Johnson, wing players who can't shoot and have really struggled in the NBA. And that's sort of where I see Troy Brown. So if you're in more of I'm taking a potential type of pick with an ability to go really upsidey, I think that Brown could be your guy there in that zone, or even higher. Maybe you take him ahead of a Bruce Brown, or you go higher than the Chandler Hutchison or a Kyrie Thomas. I can understand that. I'm just not totally sold on the upside of Troy Brown, and that's why I'm a little bit down on what he is able to do there. That's why I've got him 30th. But again, it's not one that I feel great about, and I feel like it's got pretty significant chance for it to be a miss in my regard. And I fully recognise that could potentially be the way that it goes. The next guy is interesting. Jared Vanderbilt, the HSV, out of Kentucky, drafted by the Denver Nuggets. I've got him at number 31. He was injured in his freshman season, only played 14 games, but what really stands out here is an astonishing rebound rate. This is absolutely astonishing for a guy that's 6'9". He averaged 18.5 rebounds per 40 minutes. Bananas. 1.8 blocks. Ridiculous. His athleticism is through the roof. A steal. 2.4 assists, but only 13.8 points. Didn't hit a three. 43% on his two-pointers, which is yuck. 63% from the line. Also yuck. But the advanced stuff did really like him outside of the shooting. Strong block, enormous rebounding percentage, and the Carmelo stuff thinks that he has got significant upside. But there's a clear risk there that he never gets to that sort of level just because of that rebounding rate real in those 14 games that he played for Kentucky. Is the athleticism there? Yeah, it absolutely is. But can he figure out how to shoot at all? So I think that he is a great pick here in this sort of zone. We're talking upside type players. I've got him and Troy Brown grouped together there. Brown probably is a little bit safer, but probably has a lower upside than what Vanderbilt does. But is a guy that I'd definitely be swinging for. He can pass, he can rebound, he can block shots. It's a great combination of skills, but can he shoot at all? That's the real question mark when we're looking at him and his long-term dynasty value. The next one that we want to look at is number 32, and that's Debates Diop, who fell significantly. He went to the Minnesota Timberwolves. He is a player that really did step up in his senior season at the Ohio State University. Averaged 24 points per 40 minutes to go with 10.5 boards, a steal, and 2 blocks. Shot 36% from three. His three-point shooting's all over the place. 46% as a rookie. As a freshman, 32 as a sophomore, 20 as a junior, only in 9 games due to injury, and then 36% last season. It's the strong rebounding rate, the strong block numbers, which have been solid across his entire college career, that does give you some hope for him. Strong advanced numbers as well for Bates Diop, and I think that he fell too far. And of course, the guys in front of him, Taj Gibson, Gorgie Jeng, they aren't entrenched in those spots. Of course, they will be for this season, and by entrenched, I mean that Taj Gibson at some point will retire, and then Tom Thibodeau will have to go in a certain direction. But Bates Diop, I think, is a worthy option here. A rebounding, shot-blocking, power forward type of guy who's shown some stretchability. You're going to have to wait seasons for this to come along, but a solid free throw shooter is always a good thing to bank on with a big man as well. And while the upside may not be there, I can see him being a rotational level player, and I think it's worthy of a pick here, well above his actual draft slot, even if that upside isn't necessarily that high, because again, he is a little bit of an older prospect also. Let's move on to the next group of players. We're looking at pick 33, and this is a massive upside guy, and that's Melvin Frazier from Tulane, who went to the Orlando Magic. Frazier, one of the best athletes in the draft. I guess it's him or Isaiah Smith, a high steals guy who did shoot a really strong percentage in his last season at Tulane, but how much of that is real? Now, he goes to Orlando, a team that is offensively starved, and he's not going to really help in that area, but he does, of course, have wingspan, which is all that front office cares about. 18.5 and 6.5 per 40 minutes, but handled the ball a little bit, over 3 assists per 40, 2.5 steals, and a block, and shot 39% from 3. But his first 2 seasons in college, he was under 29% from 3, and that's a little bit discouraging. And you tie that in with the fact that he was a 65% free throw shooter during his years at Tulane, but 52 as a freshman, 67 as a sophomore, 71 as a junior. That's on that Blake Griffin type free throw percentage progression, and that's a solid thing. Can he become a 77% free throw guy with 38% from 3 in the NBA in the next 3 years, averaging 2 steals and 6 rebounds and maybe 3 assists? Yeah, I think that he does have that potential to do that. That's why I've got him here. He's obviously, the athleticism is really big on him. I think he's going to struggle significantly this season as he works things out. But if you can be a positive defender as a rookie, that's a strong thing to be, and I think that he can become that guy. I think his upside is a little bit limited, but I do like his ability. At pick 34, a lottery selection. This is how much I just don't like this guy from a fantasy point of view, and I think it was a bad pick by Jerry West and the Clippers, and that is Jerome Robinson from Boston College, the shooting guard, decent size, 6'7", a guy that did put up some really strong numbers in college. We'll look at what he did. He averaged 23 per 40 minutes. He shot 83 from the free throw line. But again, it's one of those weird ones. He went from 64 as a freshman to 72 as a sophomore to 83. This is almost 10 percentage point jump per season. It's a massive leap. 41% from three last season. He averaged, but only 40 minutes, he averaged 4 rebounds and 3.7 assists with a steal. This is why I'm down on him for fantasy. Maybe he can score. Sure, maybe he can. I don't necessarily believe it. But what else is he going to do? He can't rebound. He can't really get assists. He can't get steals. He won't block shots. He'll hit some threes. But where does that leave you as a fantasy prospect? I just don't like it. It's not like he's going to come in and have an immediate impact this season. I don't think with Lou Williams there. Yes, Austin Rivers is gone and Miloš Teodosic is gone. But Patrick Beverley's there. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is still there as well. Well, not still there. They just drafted him. So I just don't see it with Jerome Robinson. I don't see massive upside in him. I don't see huge value in him long term. So that's why I've got him way down. Now, there are going to be people who are very into him because points per game is important. And that's fine. He therefore won't be likely on any of my dynasty teams in my rookie drafts because I'm just not going to want to take him anywhere near as high as what I probably am going to happen, because people will look and say lottery selection, I'm in, and I will say nah, I'm good. You can leave him out there for me. Now the next guy I've got on my list is Landry Shamit from Wichita State, who went to the Philadelphia 76ers. I've seen wildly different approaches or appreciations of his draft spot. There's guys like Sam Vecini were like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I had him like in my 50s, and I've had other people say I had him in the 20s, and he went at 26. So I think it was actually a good pick. He's a player who was very solid last season for Wichita State, mainly because of his shooting. 49 from the field, 56 from 2, 44 from 3, and it wasn't fluky because he shot 44 from 3 in his sophomore season, 83 from the line, 80 in his sophomore season. 6.5 assists per game last year. Per 40. Really strong. 4 rebounds, pretty solid. There's defensive stuff. The steals and the block numbers are a level of concern. His defensive numbers and his defensive advanced stuff is far from ideal at all, but a distributing, ball handling, creating guy who can hit threes, catch and shoot, be a knockdown shooter. I think that has value not only for this Philadelphia team, but in the NBA in general. Does he fill into that Jared Bayless role when he's eventually traded or waived? Not that Bayless was playing every night, but could he move into that? Could he replace a guy like Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot in the rotation? Could he leapfrog Timothy John McConnell at some point? Yeah, just because of that shooting ability and that secondary distributing ball handling role that he is able to bring in. The defensive stuff, though, is a concern. But when you're going to the third best or fourth best defensive team in the NBA, that can be mitigated to some degree. I wouldn't be expecting much out of a guy like Shamit immediately this season on this Sixers team, but this is a team that is still clearly building for the future, and he can have some value at some point with a decent level of upside. I think is probably the best way of phrasing that. The next guy at pick number 36, I'm looking at Yusuf Sanon from the Washington Wizards, selected in the middle of the second round. Many people would be not necessarily all that familiar with Sanon as a Ukrainian point guard. He will remain in Europe again this season, so we're not going to see him. The Wizards did just trade for Austin Rivers, and speaking of that, I hate the way in advance that the Wizards are going to use Thomas Satoransky or not use him. It's going to frustrate the shit out of me. Rivers is going to be a restricted or an unrestricted free agent after this season, but a guy like Sanon is an interesting option for them. He played 45 games across many different combinations last season in the Spanish league. Played in some European Cup as well. Average 6 points per 20 minutes, but it's over a steal in 20 minutes. 3 rebounds, 1.3 assists. Low number, but he is a point guard that can do some things better than that in terms of his ball handling stuff. I think the concern here is he shot 47% from the free throw line. That's a weirdly low number, and 25% from three. They are all concerning numbers, and you have to hope that they are able to improve. The steal rate and I think the ability for him to improve his assist is what gives me some hope there, and just getting competent point guards, and we know how valuable assist numbers can be in fantasy, makes me have him just a little bit higher than what others may expect. But of course, we're not expecting anything from him immediately. I do like some of his advanced numbers. They look pretty decent in terms of how he projects. He is really still young, and again, he will remain overseas for a couple of seasons, but someone to not entirely count out when you're talking about future fantasy value. All right, let's go on to the last four players in today's show. And at number 37, it's another member of the Philadelphia 76ers, and it is Shake Milton out of SMU. Another guy that opinion is divided on him, a 3-year college player for SMU, averaged almost 20 points per 40 last year, 5 assists with 5 rebounds, 1.6 steals, and shot the ball well. In fact, in his 3 seasons in college, shot 43, 42, and 43% from 3, 85 from the line. His 2-pointers at a decent enough rate as well. The assist numbers are okay. They're not fantastic. The advanced numbers, obviously the efficiency's through the roof. The PER of 24, his box score plus minus offensively is fairly strong as well. But I don't imagine that he really necessarily even makes the roster this season in Philadelphia. But it's his ability to generate solid enough shooting, get some assists, get some steals, and with high free throw rate that makes him an interesting fantasy pick at this point in the fantasy draft. At pick 38, you'll be surprised by this one, but Kendrick Williams, an undrafted player, I have got here ahead of guys who went in the first round. And again, you could very easily disagree with this, and I would have no issue with you doing this, but I was stunned that Kendrick Williams did go undrafted. He's a swingman, 6'7" guard forward type of player out of TCU. Averaged 14.6 points last year, but per 40, 10 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 1.9 steals, 40% from 3, only 69% from the free throw line. So I guess that's somewhat of a concern. Massive box score plus minus in his sophomore and junior season. PER of over 20 in both of those. Strong true shooting numbers. Great win share. Look really advanced, really strong advanced type of numbers. But why didn't he get drafted? I guess that's the concern we have to look at with a guy like with Kendrick Williams. But I think on a Denver team with Michael Porter there, maybe he becomes their 3 of the future. But if that back is screwed, then they're going to need someone. Wilson Chandler's not there long term. Juancho is more a 4 than a 3 in my opinion. He's in an opportunity, and he's going to have an opportunity in Summer League at least to show something. And even if he doesn't make the Nuggets roster, wing players who can handle, which is exactly what he can do, with really strong defensive rebounding numbers, with okay defensive type ability, that can find a spot in the NBA. So that's why I've got him as high as I do, ahead of guys, again, taken in the first round. You'll notice players like Donte DiVincenzo hasn't even gone into my list yet. And as much as I like DiVincenzo, I don't really like his fantasy game. Whereas Williams' assists, steals, rebounds, shooting, 3-point combination, I think can be really valuable. He hasn't found a team yet, but plenty of players who don't get drafted find roles in the NBA. And I'm doing some analysis of the rookies from previous seasons. There was over 120 rookies played last year in the NBA, increased over 80 or 85 from the year before, mainly because of the two ways. But over 20 of those 120 players were people who had come straight from the G League. You've got another 25 or I don't know, even more than that came from international ball. So even if Williams is a G League player this season, in the 1920 season, he could easily find his way onto a roster and become a useful player. We saw how good Tyrone Wallace was, the list manager for the Clippers last season, a guy that was drafted with a late pick, played in Utah for the Salt Lake Stars in that first season, and then made his way over to the Clippers and found his way on a 2-way contract and really, really played well. And there were plenty of those examples last season. I think Williams, while you might have to wait a couple of years, could be that guy, and I like his overall fantasy upside more than some other players who were drafted ahead of him. At pick 39, I'm going with Devonte Graham from Kansas. He was selected by the Charlotte Hornets with with pick number 34 there, I believe, in the draft, averaged 18 points per 40 minutes, 4 rebounds, and 7.7 assists with 1.7 steals. Elite three-point shooting, 43, 44, 39, and 41 across his 4 years at Kansas. Obviously, he's an older player because he played 4 years at Kansas. Really struggled with his two-point shooting last season, only 39%, so I guess that's somewhat of a concern. Defensively, he's not horrible, but he's not great, but really high steal rate, 2.4 steals is a really strong number, and a player who I believe, with Charlotte's issues with the backup point guard spot, could find himself in a role immediately, depending on what they do with Malik Monk. And of course, depending on what they do with Kemba Walker, we could see Devonte Graham be a rotation guy immediately, or at least as early as some point in this season, and that makes him somewhat of an interesting player for Dynasty. But I'm not sure the upside is necessarily huge for him, but he's still, at this sort of point, is worth it for that high steal and assist rate, if nothing else. The 40th player on my list is the San Antonio Spurs, Chimezie Metu, the big man from USC. A strong free throw shooting, high efficiency, good shot blocker, good rebounder, and all those things really make him an okay-looking prospect for fantasy. Averaged 20 and 10 per 40 minutes last year with over 2 blocks and a steal. Shot 30% from 3 on minimal attempts. High efficiency, 73 from the free throw line as well. Does have some concerns offensively. Defensively, he can play. The Spurs have got aging big men, we know, with Pau Gasol there. We don't know what LaMarcus Aldridge is older than you think. Metu could be a guy, probably never a 27-minute a game guy, probably not even a 24-minute per game guy, but a guy who can knock down the occasional three, block some shots, get some rebounds, score a little bit as well, and that has an okay level of fantasy value. But of course, when we're looking at this point in a dynasty draft, these guys aren't going to be big contributors, but I do think that Metu is worth looking at in this sort of a spot, and he goes to a team that hopefully is in a spot to develop him in the right way, and that is, of course, the San Antonio Spurs. Let's go through and go back and recap the top 40 now. At number 1, Doncic. Then number 2, Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. Number 3, 8 and 4, Trae Young. 5, Mo Bamba. Number 5. Number 6, Marvin Bagley III. Number 7, Wendell Carter Jr. Number 8, McCall Bridges. Number 9, Michael Porter Jr. Number 10, DRC Isaiah Smith. Number 11, Miles Bridges. Number 12, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. 13, Colin Sexton. 14, The Rock DJ Rob Williams. Number 15, Janan Musa. Number 16, Josh Okogie. Number 17, Kevin Huerta. Number 18, Ali Okobo. Number 19, The Fort, Kevin Knox. Number 20, Lonnie Walker IV. And then all the guys from today's show. At number 21, Jacob Evans. Number 22, DeAnthony Melton. Number 23, Rowdy Rodion's Kuruks. Number 24, Issac Banga. Number 25, Kyrie Thomas. Number 26, Chandler Hutchison. Number 27, Mitchell Robinson. Number 28, the burner, Jalen Brunson. Number 29, Brucey Brown. Number 30, Troy Brown. 21, the HSV, Jared Vanderbilt. Number 32, Debates Diop. 33, Melvin Frazier. 34, Jerome Robinson. 35, Landry Shamit. 36, Yusuf Sanon. 37, Shake Milton. 38, Kendrick Williams. 39, Devonte Graham. And number 40, Chimezie Metu. That does it for part 2 of the Dynasty Rookie Ranks. I'll be back tomorrow to go through picks 41 through to, I think, 64 at the end of that list. I'll talk about all those guys for those of you who have got back-end Dynasty picks. If you like the podcast, 5-star rating and review, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. Thumbs up, subscribe, all the business, and check out all the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network shows. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Malcolm Delaney.